There's a certain kind of person who stares at tattoos quietly, not with judgment, not with fear, but with hesitation they can't fully explain. They admire the art, the meaning, the confidence behind it, and still, something inside them says no, even when everyone else seems completely certain. And eventually, they begin wondering something strange. Why does permanence make me uncomfortable? Why does the idea of changing my body forever feel emotionally heavier than it should? If that feels familiar, this isn't random. It's psychological. Imagine this. You're with friends late at night. Someone rolls up their sleeve proudly, a tattoo with deep emotional meaning. Everyone gathers around immediately. Stories are shared. Emotions are attached. People admire the symbolism. And while you appreciate it genuinely, your mind drifts somewhere else entirely. Not toward the tattoo itself, toward the permanence of it, because suddenly your brain starts imagining the future. What if your personality changes? What if your values evolve? What if something meaningful today stops feeling emotionally true years later? And that single thought becomes impossible to ignore. Pause for a second. Think about who you were years ago. Your mindset, your identity, your emotional priorities. Now imagine permanently carrying one version of yourself forever physically. How does that feel internally? That feeling explains more than you think. Because people who refuse tattoos often experience identity as something fluid, changing, growing, emotionally evolving constantly, and permanent decisions feel difficult when your inner world never stays still long enough. This isn't about being boring, and it's not about fear either. It's about emotional awareness. People who hesitate around tattoos often think deeply about long-term consequences, not just practical ones, emotional ones. They don't simply ask, "Do I like this?" They ask, "Will this still emotionally feel like me later?" And reflective minds struggle with that question deeply because emotionally thoughtful people understand something important. Feelings change, meaning changes, even identity changes quietly over time. Real life looks like this: saving tattoo ideas for months, then suddenly losing emotional attachment entirely, admiring tattoos beautifully on others, while never wanting one personally, feeling emotionally uncomfortable with irreversible choices, and sometimes feeling pressured to explain your decision, like you're missing something important. But there's another hidden layer too. For some people, their body already feels emotionally complete, private, personal, not something they naturally feel driven to modify permanently. And while others express identity externally, some people express it internally instead, through thoughts, values, energy, behavior, not appearance. That doesn't make them less expressive, just differently expressive. Pause again. Have you ever avoided something permanent because your mind naturally imagines future regret? That mindset usually affects everything: relationships, career choices, big emotional commitments. Because some people mentally live inside future consequences constantly. They emotionally rehearse outcomes before acting, and that awareness shapes their entire personality. But here's where people misunderstand them. Refusing tattoos doesn't mean someone lacks individuality. Sometimes it means they understand themselves too deeply to permanently define themselves. Because emotionally reflective people know identity is never fully finished. They're always becoming someone new internally. And permanence can feel emotionally restrictive to minds constantly evolving. But honestly, there's fear involved sometimes too. Fear of regret, fear of emotional detachment, fear of looking at something permanent someday and no longer recognizing the version of yourself who once chose it. And emotionally sensitive people feel that possibility intensely, not casually. That's why tattoos can feel emotionally overwhelming, even when they appreciate the art itself deeply. Here's the twist most people never realize. People who refuse tattoos often spend enormous time reflecting internally already, questioning themselves, rebuilding themselves, trying to understand who they truly are. So permanence feels difficult because their identity already feels emotionally unfinished, still growing, still shifting, still changing quietly beneath the surface. And maybe they don't want one emotional moment to permanently define them physically forever. Not because they fear self-expression, because they value emotional freedom deeply. So if you're someone who never wanted tattoos, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not emotionally closed off. You're not too serious. And you're definitely not less expressive than others. Your mind simply experiences permanence differently. You think ahead emotionally. You reflect deeply before attaching meaning permanently. You understand how temporary emotions can feel eternal until time changes them quietly. And maybe that hesitation isn't weakness. Maybe it's self-awareness. Because while some people express themselves through permanent symbols, others express themselves through growth, through change, through becoming someone new repeatedly. And maybe neither way is more meaningful, just different. Because at the end of the day, the deepest parts of someone's identity were never written on skin. They were written quietly inside the choices they make, the emotions they carry, and the person they slowly become over time.